Mm, mm.
Hi, Ann.
Hello. Mm, 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 mm. Yes. Mm, 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 mm. I am testing the audio. Please let me know if it is working. You can raise your hand or wave. Mm. And you hear me wave at me. Anybody who's on the call. Hey, can you log into the Zoom meeting for me? Or I can get somebody else to. I'm gonna get you to log into Zoom meeting on my phone or your phone. I have my computer with me. Because I can't tell whether they can hear me. They're not answering me. I'll log in on my. Mm, 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 mm,
I'm gonna put these up. Bend over to pick them up. Greetings. How are you all doing today? Thank you for coming out, our first meeting of the year. And I have the dubious pleasure of being both the board member in charge and the speaker. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. I'd like to welcome you all to the Ethical Humanist Society of the Triangle. Our Ethical Humanist Society promotes the use of reason and science in the search for and commitment to living an ethical humanity. We believe that personal inquiry, responsibility, and accountability are the best bases for ethical. It was loosely based on a couple of articles that appeared in an online magazine that I subscribed to called Philosophy Now. And in particular, there were several articles on this general topic of atheism in this particular issue. And there was one by a guy named Amrit Pathak. And Amrit Pathak is a student at Delhi University, which is in Delhi in India. And so he wrote an article about the philosophical foundations of atheism. And I took a lot of the material that you're going to see today from that I thought was a really interesting article. He suggests that atheism is a form of scientific naturalism. And as such, um, we best comprehend the world through science and reason rather than resorting to supernatural explanations for the phenomenon that we see every day. This is an existential philosophy, which basically means that our values, our actions, our purpose is up to us to discover from what we see in the world around us, and is not really supplied from an external or supernatural source. And secular humanism and ethical culture are fully compatible with this worldview. Human interactions are therefore not judged by some predefined moral code, but rather by the effect our actions have on each other. By the way, the QR code, if you're watching, is a link to all the slides. So if you want to see the slides on your phone or something, you can do that. So this is sort of an overview of the talk, and we'll jump right in. And I want to start with what I call human religious history. Human beings have had a very, very long history of religious type stuff. And if you're looking at this picture on the left, there's two hands here. Yeah. Yeah.
Audience can't hear you.
But I'm just going to point briefly to these two. The two hands that you see are imprinted on this limestone cave wall roughly 40,000 years ago. And, you can say, why are these people doing this? And well, because it's fun. I don't know. What else are you going to do 40,000 years ago? There's no TV. So, but it could also speak to, some inner longing to make a mark in the world, to leave our identity as part of something. Dorothy. Wait a second. We've got to make sure our Zoom folks can hear.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was kind of distracted. What, they left handprints? Is that what you said they left?
Yeah, do you see?
I can't see them, no.
Let me show you.
I don't
There's
see it.
There's an outline right here.
Ah, got it.
A
Okay.
hand, and then there's another one which is kind of going this way up there. And it's kind of etched off, if you will, because it's been there for 40,000 years. Hold your ears. Those are where they took samples for actually uranium dating, which is what they used for determining the age of these paintings. They were sampling the pigment. Yes, Amy. One more, hang on. Normally we save questions for the end, but we can do that. It's all right. We're a small group, and I may enlist someone to help run the mic so Maura doesn't have to jump up.
Is this the image that was found at the in a cave at the top of a mountain in Indonesia?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
actually, this is one of many, and they go down through the ages until recent prehistory. People have been doing this kind of thing in caves with various pigments. And there's one
Oh,
in
yeah.
France that has like 1,000 handprints all over the wall. This is the earliest one they found. So, so these these kinds of religious things. And the thing on the right is a similarly dated 40,000-year-old lion man statue. Okay, so it's mixing nature and reality with some kind of perhaps supernatural ideas or something. Or it could be some kid was just having fun. I don't know. We don't know. 40,000 years old, though, we were definitely thinking about things beyond ourselves and thinking of ourselves in an abstract sort of way as part of the inexplicable complexity of nature. And indeed, graves from as much as 100,000 years ago, and I don't have a slide to show that, have artifacts of stone statues, icons, food, things that were put in there to help a person along or to show gratitude to a person after they've passed, after they've died, right? So that's up to 100,000 years ago, we're finding that. Currently, our world population, this is in 2020, we've gone up a little bit since then, was about 8 billion people, right? And if you look at this slide, and you can see on the right, it's a little hard to see because I tried to cram in a lot of stuff there, but the top 3 religions in terms of numbers of people are Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. Together, they make up about 5.5 billion of that 8 billion people on the planet. Now that's over 2/3 of people professing a religious belief. Now, all of them may not exactly be religious, but they claim that, in surveys and forums, and that's quite a bit. And when you look at people who claim to be atheists, we're down here somewhere, if you are an atheist or an agnostic, at about 10% of the population of the world. So, 0.9 billion or so. And so the point of this slide is that religion has been a dominant force in the development of human culture for a very, very long time, and currently is still a dominant force in culture and society. So, given this situation, you can sort of conclude that, well, humans are basically religious kinds of creatures. But atheists and agnostics, and atheists in particular, as I would like to define them, pardon me, are not quite satisfied with that worldview. And so atheists can look at religion and ask questions that religious people may not quite be able to answer. One of the questions that arises if you're an atheist and you're questioning about the existence of God, or an agnostic questioning about the existence of God, one of the common issues that are raised is what's called the problem of evil. Okay, how can an all-knowing, omnipotent, benevolent God coexist with the obvious horrors that we have visited upon ourselves, or have visited upon us from natural causes like volcanoes and wildfires and things like that? I'm sorry, hurricanes. You can name a lot. And these 3 people, I hesitate, I was going to say gentlemen, but I don't think that fits, down here in the lower left have been responsible for millions and millions of deaths, each of them, Stalin, Hitler, and Pol Pot. Okay, vicious things. Well, a religious person will say, if you ask a religious authority about this problem of evil, this inconsistency between a benevolent God and the horrors visited by these folks upon all of us, we'll say, well, we have free will, and so therefore these people have failed the test and they're going to hell. Okay. Okay. However, that doesn't allow you to explain the natural disasters that have killed and maimed indiscriminately millions and millions of people. So you can make a reasonable argument or conundrum for a religious person. How can you explain that? If there's an all-knowing, all-seeing, benevolent, loving God, why are we facing stuff like these natural disasters that are horrid and indiscriminately kill? So another issue that can arise is the problem of free will. And there's a fundamental problem with free will and a God that sees all, knows the past, the present, the future. How can that be if you can make decisions yourself, right? There's an inconsistency there. And so, free will is basically fundamentally incompatible with this idea of an all-knowing deity. Similarly problematic, but in a different way, is the randomness that exists in the universe. And what you're looking at here are quantum mechanical models of where an electron is at any given time in a hydrogen atom, right? And so we know from physics that quantum mechanics, which is our best model for understanding how these atoms are put together, cannot say with any certainty where an electron would be at any given time. We only have a specific probability of where it might be at any given time. So fundamentally, this system is ruled by randomness. And basically, quantum mechanics are is the model for matter, that the existence of matter. It's governed by this randomness in quantum mechanics. So if you think about it, rather than having free will, what we really have is random will. Okay. You can't say it's also incompatible with the nature of an all-knowing God because there's no way to know. We can show through the mathematics of quantum mechanics that you can't know where things are and how things are going to work out at any given time. So, these are some conundrums that atheists will point to and can say are inconsistent with the idea of God. Now, this is a evolutionary tree, if you will, of religions. And obviously, I don't expect you to read the fine print, but as you go around that tree in different branches, these are how different faiths have sort of been generated over time as, one religion splits off into two different sects, and then they form their own sects and subsects of different faiths. This is an evolutionary tree, if you will, of how many different religions have evolved over time. So an atheist again may ask, if there is a God, why do we have so many different potentially incompatible and warring religions? Why is that tolerated? That's a difficult question for a theologian to answer. And pardon me. So if this can happen, if religious beliefs can evolve over time, how does that allow for the constants, the permanence, the sort of fixed moral codes that religion offers us. If things are changing and can change through history, over time, how does that fit? So religion, it looks like, can change with culture. As we evolve, as our culture and society evolves, so can religion.
What's the yellow part?
The question was, what's the yellow part? And the answer is, I forgot. I looked at it kind of closely a while ago, but the link is there and the slides will be available. And you can go in and zoom in and enjoy that. All right. So it appears that religion can change and evolve as scientific knowledge does as well. And some of the doctrines that theologians have typically put us at the center of the universe. You know, we are God's creation. Many religions say this, not all, many do. And so if we are at the center of the universe, we have some problems if we're theologians explaining what this man had to say, and that's Galileo. And the Latin "eppur si move" basically means, but it moves. Right? And so the earth at that time was considered to be the center. And you can see it moves. What a picture. You know, if we're at the center of the universe and if we are the center of God's creation, why does it move? It shouldn't. It should be the center. And so our religious folks today will admit the earth goes around the sun, but they didn't back then. And that was gospel back then. That was God's word. That was God's truth. God's truth apparently is flexible. And this is one of my favorite slides in this presentation. What you're looking at in that big green square is a map of the galactic area that we live in, okay? Every single little tiny dot you see is a galaxy, okay? Not a star, a galaxy, okay? And the Milky Way is that little speck up there in the Virgo cluster. The Virgo cluster is an enormous cluster of millions and millions and millions of galaxies, right? And this, by the way, is only a two-dimensional slice of a bigger three-dimensional picture that would take up larger than this room if we were trying to see on a scale like that the entire universe. It's a tiny segment of the entire universe. We know from estimates, we can estimate that the Milky Way galaxy has about 100 billion stars, right? And it is 100,000 light years across. We will never, ever get out of this galaxy. We're stuck here. I don't care what kind of, that's just too far to go, right? It takes light traveling at, 186,000 miles a second, something like that. 100,000 years to get from one end of our galaxy to the other. And we're that tiny little spot on this map. All right, the galaxies of the dots are linked. And you can see these massive structures like the Virgo cluster. And then there's this thing called the Great Attractor, which seems to be sucking galaxies into it. Nobody really knows what that is. Dorothy, question.
I'm sorry, I'm being very disruptive today.
It's all right.
Can you define, I took basically no science in college. Can you define exactly what you mean by a galaxy? Is that a solar system or?
Right. Yeah, so the Milky Way galaxy, it's like this big spiral thing that has, 100 billion stars in it, and it's swirling around a gigantic black hole at the center. And that attracts, that the gravitation from that enormous mass at the center of the galaxy is so intense that even light can't get out. And so that's why they call it a black hole. But all of the 100 billion stars that are in our galaxy are sort of swirling around that like water spiraling down a drain. Okay, Jan.
This has always puzzled me. It seems that they talk about you can look out in the sky and see the Milky Way. I mean, obviously we're in the Milky Way, but where are we? What are we seeing when we supposedly see the Milky
Yeah,
Way?
what we're seeing is one arm of these multiple spirals that are, if you look at it, it looks like kind of a swirly pattern with arms kind of going from outside towards the center, spiraling in. And we're in one of those arms, about 2/3 of the way out on one arm, which kind of belies the center of the universe thing, right? And what we're seeing is a dense swath of stars that make up that arm. Okay. And you can't see them here. If you go out to the middle of the desert in, New Mexico or somewhere. I've been out in New Mexico, far from where there's lights, and you can see all the stars that we can see, which is a tiny, tiny fragment of the 100 billion in the Milky Way galaxy. We're seeing one of those arms, basically. All right. So current estimates suggest there may be 2 trillion galaxies. So now, if every galaxy like ours has 100 billion stars, and we may not be a really big galaxy, so there may be others with many, many more, you're talking hundreds of trillions of stars. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot. All right. And by the way, if you look at these numbers, I looked that stuff up, SGX, SGY, and SGC. We're only looking at an XZ, X, Y, and Z plane. We're only looking at an XZ slice. And the numbers that you see are in kilometers per second, and that's in redshift degrees. That's how we know how far away something is, by how much redshift it has, which is how the light changes color because it's moving away from you, or and the further things are away from us, the faster they move away from us. And so that's how we can judge distances. All right. So that's a problem. How can you be the center of the universe if you're not the center of the universe and you're a tiny little speck out in the middle of nowhere? All right. Another conundrum that arose as science progressed was Darwin, and you all are pretty familiar with that story. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I love this quote: "From so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved." And that's like in the last section of his book, last few pages of his Origin of Species. So, what we know now is that from very, very simple rules, you can create enormous complexity. And I have an example of that. And this speaks to evolution as it does to a really cool computer game. So this is called Conway's Game of Life. And Conway's Game of Life has 4 rules. And it's on a grid like this. And each square in the grid can either be black or white. Black is live, white is dead. And so any live cell, any live square with fewer than 2 live neighbors dies as if by underpopulation. Any live cell with 2 or 3 live neighbors lives on to the next generation. Any live cell with more than 3 live neighbors dies as if by overpopulation. And any dead cell with exactly 3 live neighbors becomes a live cell as if by reproduction. And so those are the rules. So if you look at and count up like a particular square, and I'm just going to jump and point at one real quick. This one here, it's got 3 neighbors. It's going to die if you advance to a next time slice of this computer program. Whereas others will be created based on these simple rules. And what this is the beginning screen of something called a Gosper glider gun. And I'll show you what that does, assuming I can make the link work. And so each iteration of this is all those rules being applied to every square. And look at the little thing coming off at the bottom. That's called a glider. And the Gosper glider gun produces those just all by following just those 4 simple rules. I'm going to speed it up. I sped it up and I narrowed down the view, and you can see that's all it does. But it does it all by itself, following those 4 simple rules. So the point of this is you can make incredible complexity. And I think that's pretty amazing. And this is a simple thing. They have all kinds of weird things that they can do with this computer program, if you will. And there's a whole lexicon of different things that you can make. But just as a point, that simplicity of rules does not mean lack of complexity, right? When you look at insect behavior, bees, ants, they follow very, very simple rules. You know, you bump into something, you turn around, or, and with that, they can form complex communities. They can do just by following simple rules. And the link is there. So if you decide you want to play with this, you can start your own things. You can see what happens. You get amazing patterns. And I'll leave it at that. So to move on, so where I wanted to go with the Gosper before we go on to this person, where I really wanted to say was, as a final comment, and I apologize for putting the next slide up, but the final comment is consider the implications of what would happen if sometime in the near future, the SETI program, which is a search for extraterrestrial life, using mainly radio telescope information, looking for radio signals from far, far away that are intelligent, not just chaotic random stuff from the universe. What if intelligent life is found to exist elsewhere in the universe, removing humans even further from a central role in religious creation? Okay, how will religions have to adapt then? And it's complicated, but what it shows is that religions, like other human phenomenon, like earthly phenomenon, evolve and change. So that's really contrary to their stated principles of, ultimate authority, unique things that you have to believe, things that are literally, if you will, etched in stone, right? So religious doctrine is often cited as required for a moral, philosophical, correct society. If you don't have religion, you're going to have chaos. This is an argument theologians and religious people will make. Without the constraints of spiritual guidance, we will descend into chaos. It'll be horrible. But you can also argue from an atheist point of view that longstanding religious traditions etched in stone are literally thousands of years old. These rules of behavior that we are to take as what we need to do mostly were generated at a time when people lived in small villages, were born there, lived there, and died there, and never left there. They were not necessarily geared towards a society that, has, things like cell phones, mass transit, and social media influencers. Okay. That was pretty foreign to the people that wrote these words originally. So adaptation, as we've seen, absolutely happens and is critically important to maintaining a successful society. Adaptation is difficult if your rules are etched in stone. Things like contraception and birth control, end of life issues, dietary restrictions are all examples of what I would call hangovers from a time when these rules were written. There's really no need for worrying about things like that if you take an atheist point of view and are allowed to flex and bend. So moving on now from concerns about religion to what I call the advantages of atheism, secular systems are less dogmatic. We can be open if you are in the secular camp to adaptation based on human experience and reasoning. And our society, which was founded in many ways by Felix Adler, although there's a lot of historical impetus behind that, is one where we look to practical outcomes as a way to judge whether an action is moral or correct, rather than looking to a supernatural fixed moral code. All right. And so this quote from Adler's book, Creed and Deed, says, in order to find a common basis wherein good men, whether believers or unbelievers, can unite, we look to moral law itself, whose certainty rests in the universal experience of civilized humanity. Okay. So that way, we're not constrained to outmoded things. And it also allows us to consider that no social group, no religion or nation or anyone should claim a moral superiority over another. And you can draw any political ideas you might have from that at your own will, but the ultimate arbiter of moral and ethical behavior should be the application of empirical science and reason. And this is an example of, coexist, right? I mean, we can live together. It doesn't matter that you're a different religion, whether you're a Muslim, a Jew, or a Christian in this case. You can still live together and be happy. So, critical thinking and diversity is a really important thing. If pardon me, if you want to invest your philosophy without in a way of looking at the world without constraints or a filter of authoritative religious beliefs, you can support positive social outcomes. And so this is a group that we've had recently speak here. Susan, what was her name? Susan, I forgot her name. In fact, she's on the slide right there in the middle, came and spoke to us about Humanist Minnesota and the billboard they put up, which said, reject Christian nationalism, keep religion out of the state house. They've recently put up another one, good without God, discover humanism. And I think that this is very much supportive of all the arguments that we've made, that moral actions need to be classified to the extent to which they benefit us all rather than to which they conform to a predefined code. And some final thoughts. I'm going to bring you final thoughts from a professed Anglican, not an atheist, but he was a person who had a lot of different ideas in his head. He was a contemporary of Shakespeare, lived in the late 1500s, early 1600s, and he wrote an essay titled On Superstition. And in that, although he was, an Anglican, he said that atheism leaves a man to sense, to philosophy, to natural piety, to laws, to reputation, all which may be guides to an outward moral value, though religion were not. But superstition dismounts all these and erects an absolute monarchy in the minds of men. Now, you have to forgive him. He didn't say in the minds of men and women or humankind. He was a creature of his times. But I like that quote. And I think that it's one that says we need not only look to any particular source. There's no reason why we need to dispel the ideas of folks who are religious, as long as we are allowed to pursue what is reasonable, rational, and just for a benefit that will be available to everyone. So that's it for the talk. And so I'd like to have some discussion, but before we do, we're going to pass the baskets. Well, you have to give me a second. I have to switch roles here. Our society is an all-volunteer organization. We receive no money from any other organization. We survive due to your commitment to our common goals. So we pass the baskets and thank you in advance for your generous contributions. And while we're doing that, I will mention some ground rules for Q&A, and this goes to the folks on Zoom as well. Please raise your hand or your Zoom hand, as the case may be. Wait for the microphone. Pardon me. Ask one question at a time, and let everyone have a chance before you ask an additional question. And so, as we are doing that, Dorothy will pass the mics. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns? Yeah.
I have to bring the chat back up from the online people.
Yeah, and if you're online, you can donate on our website at the link that says donate.
Yes, but in the meantime, Chris pointed out earlier in your talk that not all religions are theistic. For example, Buddhism and Taoism, although there are some theistic Taoists that I know. I don't know of any theistic Buddhists. So I wanted to add that in for Chris.
Yeah, well, I agree 100% with Chris, and the example that I posted on that one slide with all of the religions listed, the top three, Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, were making up 2/3 of the population. So while there are certainly those that are non-theistic, the majority of us appear to be in the other category. Jan.
This is kind of an observation, I guess, and going along with what Francis Bacon's quote is that it seems the biggest problem is that most religions claim to be the true religion, and there's no real way to cooperate when you have that as a basic tenet of your beliefs. And it's kind of a thought problem to decide, what would the world be like if that was everyone just accepted, okay, this is my religion. You
Yeah.
do what you want.
Well, epistemologically speaking, religions function on the method of authority, right? So you know, we have a variety of ways of seeking truth and seeking what is real and what's not real and what's there and what isn't. We have one of them would be what I would call the method of authority, where you ask an authoritative person and they say, that's the way it is. There are other methods, the scientific method being a good counterexample, where you have a way of determining, for example, if something is true or not. Science doesn't approach or consider questions of religion because by definition they are involving the supernatural, which it doesn't address whatsoever. But scientific, as we've seen on the slide, scientific facts, theories, and ideas can impact religion in pretty significant ways and change the philosophy of that. Science has to be falsifiable so that you can just potentially disprove it. The method of authority doesn't have that because the authority, it's true. The authority says it, it's true, right? Science can also be a method where you use statistical evidence to support an idea. You use logic and what I would call logical positivism, a way to say, yeah, I mean, all this evidence supports this. Again, the method of authority, which is what religion uses, doesn't have that either. So there's no way to challenge an authoritative statement from a theologian other than, say, getting a different theologian. Solomon.
Excuse me. I'm finding a lot of issues with this because this whole presentation lends itself more to discussion rather than questions.
Mhm.
I'm finding.
Discuss.
Yeah. Because some of the issues I'm finding, one is one, I have an issue with the terminology of supernatural because it has a broad definition and oftentimes has negative connotations, demons, witches, warlocks, and lumping benevolent beings in with all of that feels a bit derogatory for anyone that chooses to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that discussion. The other discussion I'm finding is the differentiation between a supreme being and the practice of that God and religion may be two different things. One is the way people decide to practice it. The other, as I can posit, is that there can be a God, we just have it wrong. That
Right.
people practice it and come into conflict, not because of what the supreme being is dictating, but because of what people have decided to exercise in reason for power, money, or whatever their personal reasons may be, and that kind of conflict. And so it seems to me that trying to conflate the two is not necessarily the most objective way to determine the viability of science versus religion.
Well, I think Maura may have a response. I'll give you my top of the head response to the second part, which is that what I am claiming as religion and the practice of religion and the presence of a what I would call supernatural figure controlling God, if you will, is what the majority of humans seem to believe, at least according to the charts and surveys that we have. So that would be my response, basically, that it's not something I made up. It seems to be what's out there. Maura, you wanted to address
What
that?
I would say is that Solomon's making a really interesting differentiation. And it is true that religions versus the belief in some sort of greater power, they're not quite the same thing. But I think what Fred is talking more about is established religions and the different dictates that follow from them, which are pretty hard and fast, where, you know, if you're Muslim, you're really not supposed to drink alcohol. If you're a conservative Jewish person, you can't let non-Jewish people eat on the same dishes. There shouldn't be no dairy and meat together. And these are all somewhat prescriptive rules. To me, that is one of the big differentiations between established religions and a belief in something greater than yourself. So I think Fred is talking more about the first and not as much about the latter. And I really think that belief in a greater power than yourself, regardless, is not antithetical to coming to an ethical society. In fact, in some ways, I think it makes sense, because really, if you believe in good things that are greater than yourself, it makes it even more important to figure out how to make things good yourself. But for Fred's purpose of this talk, he also was talking about how atheism fits into it, which fits in sort of the same way, only opposite.
Yeah, and Francis Bacon, for example, himself, as I said, being an Anglican, he lived in a time of religious wars that were devastating to people. And so when he said, he titled this pamphlet that had this quote in it on superstition, he actually, it is argued by historians, was differentiating superstition and religion in separate ways. Partly, it could be said to protect himself from persecution. So,
One of the other conundrums to me is the beginning. Religion believes that God always existed, but do they really think that? And if you just believe in science and the Big Bang Theory, what do they think happened before that, or where all this started?
yeah, so that's that. There are obviously questions that we don't have answers to. A logical person could say that atheists are just as bad as religious people in terms of accepting something that they have no evidence for, right? So agnosticism, or someone saying, well, I just don't know, is the only logical, rational position to achieve. Others can say, well, yeah, but I just don't believe that crap, or something like that, but you can ask anyone who professes to be an atheist, how do you know? And they don't really have an answer. It's I wasn't trying to say that one particular position was right or wrong. What I was trying to do was point out that a definition of atheism that encompasses atheists and agnostics, which I mentioned in the blurb that got sent out by email, is really a fairly common belief right now. You could lump people together in this group of, and they're called the nuns, right? None of the above. Really, what those folks have to rely on is the reason and logic to develop their moral, ethical codes and ideas, because that's all they've got, really. And I think that's not a bad thing. But
And Fred, thank you for putting this all together.
you're
A lot of
welcome.
work.
My pleasure.
A couple things. Early on in your presentation, I was reminded there may be one or two people here who were part of the society many years ago when we sponsored a a debate at the Carborough Community Center. And it was advertised around a lot of it was well attended by a lot of college age people. And the name of the debate is there a God? Okay. Something that college age people like to try to figure out, right?
Mhm.
So Randy Best was taking the position that there is not. And a local thoughtful minister took the position that there is. They each presented their side, and then there were questions and comments. The one question I remember is the very last one, and it was such a good question. And the young man in the audience asked them, what is the best argument that the other side has? Okay. And the minister's argument was, as you stated, the existence of evil. And Randy's argument was faith. And I just always thought that was interesting. On the question of supernatural, I just would advise, in my life experience, it's not a good term to use when talking to a religious person. For example, my dad, who was a life scientist, to him, God was thoroughly in nature. God showed himself in all nature. So the concept of him being supernatural made no sense to him.
Yeah, and many scientists are religious, and they can do very, very good science. To them, faith is a separate realm, right? I think many atheists would say that you can't separate those things. But I think that's how people deal with it. They sort of wall it up. It's demonstratable through sociological studies that faith and the ability to believe in something and focus on it and concentrate is a good thing in terms of healing, in terms of health. So there's a role for that, depending on your proclivities. If you're willing to accept it or not, it can be a good thing. Yeah.
Hello, since no one else has raised their hand, I had a couple of other things. One, I love the fact that the two of them did not dodge the answering of that question, if nothing else. But I felt I wanted to address a couple of earlier points. One of them is the notion that an all-knowing being somehow negates free will, which I don't think is an absolute. Just because one person knows everything does not mean that I don't still have a choice in doing whatever the heck I want. He just knows what it is and I'm going to do. The other one might address some of the ills we may have to a small degree, as I've come to kind of think about it as parenthood, rather than the idea of God or being having his hands in everything and every decision we may make, is the notion that as a parent, you tell your children what they're supposed to do or give them the best advice that you can give them, and then let them go off and kind of figure out the rest of it and do what they can. I mean, I am not involved in my daughter's life most of the time. Only if she needs my help and may call on me, then I'll get involved. But other than that, I've given her the information. I've given her the best of what I have. Carry on. And that's kind of how, if I'm going to view a supreme being, addresses the notion that we're kind of allowed to do what we want. We know what we're supposed to do. And so good luck to us.
Yeah, one of my favorite philosophers, Epicurus, was of the opinion that there were gods. They just had their own business and really didn't, mess with us, and we didn't mess with them. And it was sort of, okay to be religious. but don't think that they're going to pay attention to you. So, I mean, there's a spectrum of beliefs, of, ways people believe about how God fits into their lives or doesn't. And I forgot what your first part of your point was. What
it was the
Wait, do I share
the
the board
notion
member?
that an all-knowing being doesn't
Oh.
negate free will.
right, incompatibility with free will.
Yeah.
So I struggle with that a